Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boys Dave, Sean, and Jack here doing a little podcast, doing a little chit chat, doing a little sit down. And we're going to talk Ange Postecoglou. We're talking about the future of the Spurs team, who's going to thrive, who's going to suffer, who's going to maybe not have a future. It's good to have you, Shawnee. It's good to have you, Dave. Dave is even, taking himself out of the wilderness, is going to even show up for this conversation, which is good to see. Dave, maybe start with you. How are you? How are things, with the outlet?
Do you know what, Jack? I'm absolutely fantastic here. We're down in the deep parts of Mayo, out near Achill Island, and the weather's like Spain. It's absolutely unbelievable, and yeah, it's just good to get away. But as Tottenham fans, there's always stuff to talk about. So here we are.
Here we are, indeed. Shawnee, how are you keeping this morning?
Good, guys. Yeah, great to be back with you lot as always. Happy to be finally moving the story forward. With regards our summer, it's great that we've got this guy in early. It's wonderful that we can now move the conversation around what we're going to look like, who we're going to need, who we don't need, and everything's moving in the right direction. So I couldn't be happier to spend the next however long with you guys talking about our most favorite hobby and the thing that kills us every single year with our hopes and aspirations. Tottenham Hotspur.
The summer of Ange, yeah. Everybody. Well, let's just get straight into it. Everybody, do smash that like button, please. But first things first, we should start with our starlets up top, Kane and Sonny. Let's start with the spicy debate that always is those two amongst the fan base. But I feel like we do maybe have to think about, or at least talk about first, when we have this conversation about futures of certain players and stuff like that under Ange. Maybe we start with the big, sort of stars up front. Plenty are kind of sort of talking about whether Harry Kane or Sonny might actually struggle or might actually benefit from Ange's new system. Do you feel like one of them, Shawnee, could potentially struggle or could potentially maybe might not find it easy in, Ange ball?
Yeah. I think Ange ball is going to be an interesting experiment with some of the top line. I don't think Harry Kane, with his skill set, look, let me preface this by saying Harry Kane can adapt to any system in world football. He's good enough. He's got all of the skill set to do anything that's asked of him. It's whether or not he wants to play the role that is required of the number 9 at Celtic that Postecoglou's asked of Kyogo, and whether or not he wants to keep that position for Tottenham. Kyogo, Furuhashi, is almost like the sacrificial lamb. He gets on the end of really clever, creative moves, and he scored 34 goals for Celtic last season. But what's asked of him off the ball is an incredible amount of effort and work rate that is often goes unrewarded or unrecognized by the untrained eye. And even on the ball, a lot of what's asked of him is to pull players out of position, to make room for other people. He is not the cornerstone or the foundation of the success that Celtic have had. He's the kind of end product. He's the guy who gets on the end of it, which will be a massive 180 from what we have usually seen from Harry Kane at Tottenham. Everything goes through Harry Kane. So I don't think Harry Kane would be best served playing in the number 9 role at Tottenham. I think that if you are going to keep Harry Kane, then I think it makes more sense to ask him to step back and play the role that Matt O'Reilly plays, that kind of the more advanced number 8, or maybe the guy Rio Hatate, try and kind of emulate that role a little bit more, because I just feel like some of the wonderful talents that Harry Kane has got would go a little bit wasted if he was trying to emulate what Kyogo was asked to do. In terms of Sonny, I think he'll very much suit the system. Postecoglou likes his inside forwards to be able to play inversions, to come in on the right foot if you're on the left, to cut in from the left if you're on the right. So I think he'll be far more utilized. I think he'll get a lot more space, and I think he'll get a lot more action on the ball and get back to what he was best at doing the season before last at Tottenham and the years before that. I'm not entirely sure whether or not he's going to necessarily enjoy what's asked of him in the work rate, the press off the ball, but time will tell on that. I think that if Sonny does sort of respond to what's asked of him, I think he will have a fantastic opportunity next season. And I think the same you can make the same argument for Decky on the right-hand side, and or Pedro Porro, whoever it is that's going to be playing in that wide right role, being asked to cut inside and do what's necessary. I personally think it would suit Pedro Porro probably slightly more than Decky. But yeah, the front three, a lot of different things are going to be asked of them under a Postecoglou system than what was asked of them under a Conte system. And the big question mark for me really is around how we're going to use Harry Kane if he decides to stay at Tottenham.
If he decides to stay is definitely also the first part. I just kind of, like to play with fire here a little bit, Shawnee, because I just want to ask, when we're, building out for the future, we need to figure out what sort of players, like you just said, do want to stay, but also like, what sort of players can benefit from this system. And would we see maybe a certain Harry Kane, like you say, if he's, basically in his, number 9 role is just to sort of sit on the shoulder of, the defenders and make these kind of unselfish runs in behind, as well as sort of just be there to finish off the moves. I think Kane can do that, but like you said, it's sort of a waste of his whole package. It's a waste of his sort of talents. But if, let's say, a Sonny, potentially, also struggled or something, maybe with what was being asked of him out wide, I'm kind of just wanting to play with fire a little bit and just sort of ask you, like, whether one of these guys might potentially struggle, and then is maybe then the opportunity there to, get rid of one of these guys if they might struggle in this sort of system, or does Ange maybe have to kind of accommodate for one of them, or if not both of them, in his first season? Is maybe what I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll be honest, like I'm not entirely, I think Ange Postecoglou is certainly his own man. He's not going to be two-phased about making decisions. I think he's had to make tough decisions and try and prove himself wherever he's gone. I think that making the decision within a couple of weeks of being at Tottenham Hotspur to tell Daniel Levy, I don't want Sonny or I don't want Harry Kane, for different reasons, will be an incredibly interesting statement to make. From Daniel Levy's perspective, losing Heung-min Son would be crippling financially. Well, not crippling, but would be an incredible dent to the commercial benefits of having someone from South Korea. He's also a massive fan favourite, not just with the South Koreans, but with all Tottenham fans. And of course, Harry Kane as well. I think a lot of Tottenham fans obviously would love him to stay if he wants to be here, but some level-headed fans maybe would kind of say it's time to go. If you want to win trophies, you're probably not going to do that at Tottenham. So it's too important for your career to not end without a trophy. So I feel like it's like, in terms of tactically, I think it makes sense maybe for Postecoglou to make the decision to run the rule over one of them. But whether he's got the confidence and the courage of his convictions to make such a bold statement so early in his tenure would be incredibly interesting to see. And I think he'd be a very brave person to do that.
I think he has the cojones to, I think I said this to you yesterday, I think he has the cojones to stick it to the squad. Does he have it to really do it to the board? I think that's a different sort of, type of power, type of metal. And another thing too is he accepted this job in the first place, so it's not like he's gone into this already hating them. He's probably going into this, like, in some way, like, he probably thinks on relatively the same page. And you would think then that maybe he is going to be perhaps not a yes man with the players, but a yes man to some degree maybe with the board. And I would probably think, though, Dave, even though I'm trying to make people, sort of squirm here with this question about getting rid of Sonny or Kane, do you feel like Ange Postecoglou, when he probably originally did the interview, he probably was told you're going to have to maybe work with Sonny and Kane if they do stay around, this year?
Okay.
Start again.
Yeah, so like this whole argument with Harry Kane, like that, you hear fans saying, oh, well, maybe it's time for him to move on and win trophies. That comes from pundits on Sky Sports who want Kane out of here, who want Kane to spearhead Man United's attack so they can get back to where they want. It's an absolute nonsense argument. And the fact that Spurs fans are buying into it, and didn't learn from Jamie Carragher, by the way, because Jamie Carragher came out and said at the time, oh, Conte needs to go. But not everyone took his words for it in the way he dissected it. But no one went back and watched what he said at the start when Conte was hired, that Antonio Conte will need more than 18 months at Tottenham. And I said at the time, of course these boys are going to do it because Liverpool will be the one that will benefit from our demise. And what happened? Look where Liverpool finished compared to where we finished. And we got to be smarter than jumping in, off what these Sky pundits say about, oh, let's let Harry Kane go and leave and win a trophy. It's bollocks. I don't want him to win a team when he leaves Tottenham. It's absolute madness. Let's stop with this crap. You've got a guy who's the best player in his position in the world, who scores more goals than bloody anybody, especially at a club like Tottenham Hotspur, which no one else around the world, maybe bar Haaland, would be able to come in and do. And we're sitting here talking about, oh, let's maybe let him to move on for his career. I don't care about it. It's what's best for Tottenham Hotspur. And the thing is with this whole, another question going around, well, does he want to work with Kane and Son? It's an absolute load of bollocks. Any manager worth their sort. But yeah, look, this whole argument, does Ange Postecoglou want to come in here? And work with these guys. Of course he'll want to come in here and work with these guys. His job is a lot harder without these guys, to find players that have the technical ability, that can score goals the way they do, hold up the ball the way they do, and assist goals the way they do. Why would Ange Postecoglou not want to come in here and work with these guys? Now, on the ball, I think Sean makes a great point about Harry Kane, about him being up front, that he would more or less, you're not really asking him to create or anything like that. You're more asking him to get back to what he was doing actually under Pochettino, which is playing off the last shoulder, getting in behind. Now, Harry Kane has already demonstrated he can do that under Pochettino. Under Pochettino, he always also demonstrated he can press. Now, however, I get that he's 29 now, but it's not, for me, it all comes down to, Jack, with Kane and Son, is, are they willing to work hard? Because the basis of Ange Postecoglou is you work hard regardless of who you are. We're not carrying superstars, prima donnas, people that don't want to run. We're not carrying you. It doesn't matter who you are. So what I would say is, Jack, Ange Postecoglou will 100% want to come in and work with Son and Kane. For me, the question is do they want to work that hard out of possession? Because when you naturally sometimes reach the best player in the world, a lot of managers will cater to that and get a lot of other players to cover and do your defensive work, like we see at PSG a lot of the time. Their forward players don't have to do any defensive work. Everyone else behind them suffers and tries to pick that slack up. Ange Postecoglou will not allow that to happen. But for me, I think of course he'll want to work with them. I actually think the question comes down to, will Son and Kane want to get down, get their head down, and do the work off the ball and do the defensive work? Now, my answer to that would be yes. They had no problem doing it under Jose Mourinho. No problem sitting, dropping into shape and dropping further back under Antonio Conte. And my bet is, I think they'll buy into Ange Postecoglou and him wanting them to go and press, because it's something new for them. It's something different that they haven't had to do over the last 4 years. So for me, I have no problem with Kane and Son wanting to do the work, because to be fair to them, these guys are not prima donnas. These guys get their head down, they work hard, and they have done under every single manager that we've had. They've tried their best for them. So for me, I have no problems with Kane and Son. It's just a matter of, do they want to do the work? And when I look back at what their history and the humble people they are, my conclusion is yes.
They might look at it as like, oh, this could be the last time we press, but before we retire, they've been having their careers just sitting behind the ball for the last 5 or 6 years, and now they can finally press before their last bits of talents kind of start to fade, and they have to retire. But I think a few things you brought up there, Dave, is kind of interesting. I think what you maybe said there is, yes, Kane and Son, every manager in the world would want to work with them, but the question is, do they maybe actually want to play Ange ball? Do they actually want to commit to it, 100%? And are they even convinced by even him 100% is the question, because you've seen plenty of players sort of, right at Chelsea, do a bit of that kind of like culture revolt, against the manager, a bit of mutiny in some way, where they kind of are playing for him, but you can kind of tell they're not playing for him. I think that was obviously the case under Graham Potter at the likes of Chelsea, which was odd, right? It was a bunch of new players put into the team, but they all just clearly were not convinced by what he was doing or what he had to say, and they kind of just, in some sense, committed mutiny by the looks of things. Similar thing by with Frank Lampard, and we're kind of seeing it, I think, nowadays with a lot of players, where they kind of can collectively just sort of kind of tell each other they're just not convinced. And that could become the case with Ange Postecoglou, where maybe the bigger players might not be fully convinced by him at first, and he's going to have to battle against that. And like we said earlier, does he have the mettle to be able to to be able to make the right decisions and to be able to maybe get them back on side to try to convince them, but also to, you know, like have respect for himself. Another thing too, though, is I just feel like when you did probably do the initial, you know, interview, if you did say to Daniel Levy, my first thing is I probably want to sell Kane and Son, I don't think you probably are going to win the interview. You know,
you're not getting the job though, Jack.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting though. There is a take, right? So, you know, yesterday, Jack, you and I were going through the squad and how much of a good fit it is for Postecoglou's system, and the takeaways that I think that we landed on were that even the midfielders, where we are relatively strong with a fully fit midfield, they don't necessarily fit the roles that are required of the 6, the 8, and the 10 quite the way that Postecoglou uses them. And obviously, we all know that there is so much work that needs to be done at the back line, right? That we haven't got any centre-backs, maybe Romero. Apart from that, we've got 3 or 4 centre-backs, none of which can play a high line, none of which are fast enough, none of which are technically gifted or good enough in the air or with a ball at their feet. Right, so there's so much work to do there. We haven't got a goalkeeper. The goalkeeper that we need needs to be competent with distribution and play the sweeper keeper role. There's very few goalkeepers out there that are cheap that can do that. And so the reason I'm mentioning all this is, you know, the amount of money that it could take to be able to get the squad shaped in the way that Postecoglou, is going to be happy with, where he can put his best foot forward and get the best juice from the squeeze. It's going to be significant budget. Now, whether or not Daniel Levy has the willingness to go under the mattress and pull out 200 million quid or 150 million quid remains to be seen. But it becomes a lot easier to go out and fill all of those holes if you have 80 million pound coming in from the sale of Sonny, or 110 million pound coming in from the sale of Harry Kane. And with the rumours that Harry Kane may or may not be happy enough to stay at Tottenham after this year, it does put that additional pressure, that added kind of variable into the cocktail when you're figuring out whether or not it does make sense to let go of Harry Kane. I take your point, Dave, that, you know, ignore Harry Kane's best interest about his career, right? It's what's best for Tottenham. But there is an argument to say what's best for Tottenham right now, pending Harry Kane's willingness to stay here, is to actually get as much money as you can this summer and then give it to Ange to go and fill the 5, 6, 7 players that he needs. No?
Do you feel like, though, just quickly, that if you are to sell Harry Kane and get a fair amount of coin out of it, you already do, though, have to get 2 center backs, goalkeeper, creative midfielder, maybe a right back, a left back, and that's already, what, 4 or 5 players, maybe, you know, a right winger, a left winger to replace a Lucas, a Danjuma, those sort of guys as well. You're already kind of on like 6 or 7 players that you kind of need to bring in. That's without selling Kane or Sonny. And then you already do sell Kane. Wouldn't that then be like a Forest type transfer window? Wouldn't that be like 10 or 11 players? Yeah.
Yeah. So, no, I 100%. It's not a clear, clean answer, but I do think it has to be considered. Like, if we're having a kind of balanced debate here, I think that there has to be the consideration around how much is it going to cost to get this squad looking like a Postecoglou system, and where do you find the money to do that?
Tottenham are the 3rd highest generating club in terms of money, sports club across the world. So for me, there's no excuses for them not to pull the money. And this is where I get annoyed with the owners, that they leave us in this situation where we're in the fan base debating whether we should sell the best player in his position in the world in order to fund the rest of the squad. The fact that it's been allowed to get this bad, you don't sell your best player, you build around your best player. If Harry Kane was at any other club but Tottenham, this wouldn't be a debate and it wouldn't even be an argument. They'd just say, look, you keep him at all costs. He gets you the goals. They're like, for me, Sean, like, look, if Ange Postecoglou comes in, right, and Harry Kane doesn't want to play his way, okay, maybe you look at shipping him on, because what Ange Postecoglou cannot do is bend his principles for any player in that squad. Nobody can be above them principles. Once he changes that, he's going to fail at Tottenham, because once he does it for one, a couple of other people will start following. They'll all want the same sort of treatment. So for me, it's absolutely important that Ange Postecoglou does not bend them for Kane or Son. And if they don't want to do it, fair enough, I can accept. for the greater good of what Ange Postecoglou was trying to implement at Tottenham and trying to get us back to what we want, which is just hard-working players who want to play the right way. I can understand that argument. But what I can't understand is Spurs fans wanting to sort of hurry Harry Kane out the door. And no one can sit here and tell me that's not the case, because every day it's brought up, Harry Kane, Harry Kane, Harry Kane. Now, my thing is it doesn't take a rocket scientist, it doesn't take even a grade A math student to work out that if you take Harry Kane's goals out of the team, you're now scoring significantly less than what you're conceding. So when you look at our goals and our assists this year, it's evened out because of Harry Kane's goals, right? You take that out of the team, you're now in a position where you're conceding a lot more than you're scoring. And I take the argument, but you can buy other players to fill in and around. Right, I hear that. But if you sell Harry Kane this summer and you go and buy one or two defenders, there's no guarantee, as we've seen over previous positions that we've bought in, that that's going to hit the ground running. So when people make that argument, that's off the premise that them centre-backs are going to come in here, hit the ground running, and all of a sudden form a watertight defence. For me, I'd rather have actual evidence, visual evidence of that being the case before you let Harry Kane go anywhere. Because if you all of a sudden you let Harry Kane go, you haven't fixed your goalkeeper, your centre-backs, maybe another centre midfielder, which people are starting to want, and your striker. That's the whole spine of your team. That is going to cause you major, major problems into next season. Like, a manager is good, but when you have no spine of your team, you have nobody in that team that you can sort of use to implement your message, to get people going, this, that, and the other. So for me, it makes sense right now where Tottenham are at to get that goalkeeper in place, to get that back line in place, and to get, that midfield in place as well, and set up a good solid foundation behind Harry Kane. So when he does leave, you're not conceding the amount of goals you are. And then that means with the forward players we have, that back line, and that keeps you in the game, and then you can go and nick the game like that. But for me, I think it makes absolute nonsense to even think about selling them until we get proof that back line and that midfield can keep the goals out. Because what it will happen, it might not get us relegated, but it put us just in and around that zone, maybe just a little bit above it. And when you're down in around that zone, mindsets start to change. Players' mindset starts to change, this, that, and the other. And it doesn't take too much to sink you right down into it, as we've seen with Leicester.
I 100% agree with everything you've just said. With regards, my take on Harry Kane is that if he wants to stay, you keep him at all costs, right? And you do whatever it takes to get him to stay. I don't want him to go. I'm just putting out the argument around the raising of the money. The other point that you make around is if he doesn't want to participate in the ideology, the work rate, and the same with Son, the same with any player, right? Not just those two, but the same with any player. You have to get rid of them, not just because of the bending of the principles, but the high press doesn't work unless everyone is doing it in sync. We saw with Manchester United under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer towards the end of his reign, when two of the players or three of the players in the team weren't pressing at the same time. And even if one person, wherever the ball is, if one person on the pitch does not press and do his job, then it creates the ability to push triangles around. And Manchester United got cut open because one or two players were not doing their job. So the very first thing that Postecoglou needs to figure out is every single player, not just Harry Kane and Heung-min Son, but every single player, are you willing to do what is required for this system? Because if the answer is no, then you are not here. I don't care how big your brand is, how popular you are in the dressing room. If you're not willing to pull your weight and take one for the team and exhaust yourself every single game, then the entire system will fall apart. You have to have everyone on board. And so he has to have those conversations early. The second he gets back from Ibiza or wherever he is on holiday, he needs to get in there and meet everybody and go, okay, this is what we expect of you. In or out, yes or no? Let me know now. We've got decisions to make.
He's over at the islands with Dave.
Why do I have visions of Ange Postecoglou with glow sticks and war paint on him in a club in Ibiza?
That'd be brilliant to see that. He definitely is in the clubs right now before getting into the ugly Spurs job. But I was going to quickly emphasize that I also agree with you, Dave. But I also want to say that Sean, I think, is, like you were saying, you just want to play devil's advocate for what if maybe don't have all the funds needed to get, this sort of rebuild done. And, if one of maybe Sonny or Kane doesn't have their heart in it, then you have to look beyond it. But I was going to say the way I would rather it just be done just for clean purposes. And we've seen that the bringing in 10, 11, 12 players just doesn't work. I'd rather just kind of Levy and Lewis sort of just have to swallow, kind of their pride and spend close to 100 million. I would imagine it takes this summer in order to get, like I said, goalkeeper, 2 center backs, left back, right back, creative midfielder. And then the next summer, if a Kane or Sonny goes, you probably have to spend another 100 million close to that to think about replacing them in some outright, kind of manner. That it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy.
That's the thing, though, Jacko. Like, if you are selling a Kane and Son, you either reinvest. You've got 2 options. You either reinvest that money into a player in and around the same quality, so you don't see that sort of drop off, or you use that to spread around the team, and then automatically you're going to end up with a less quality player in that position, and that will have a knock-on effect because you're looking at building that player up to what Son was, to what Kane was. So for me, to play devil's advocate, if you're going to sell one of them, you've got to spend that money in that position to get the best in class to be able to replace them, so it seems a seamless transition. If you don't do that, you are creating a lot of problems for yourself further on down the line. You're also then, accepting that you're going to have to keep going into transfer windows to keep improving that position as time goes on. So even if you do sell one of them, for me, that money has to go straight back in to get the best in class in that position so that you're keeping that standard up here. But also, I just please, as Spurs fans, can we stop listening to the likes of Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher and people like that who genuinely want Kane out? We got to remember, Spurs are not represented in the media nowhere near as much as United, Liverpool, this, that, and the other. And because they're English as well, no one wants Harry Kane. No one wants England's best player at a club like Tottenham. They do not want it. They want him at a Man City, a Man United, a Liverpool, this, that, and the other, so they can sit there and wax lyricals about him. So when you hear them make silly arguments like, oh, well, Harry Kane needs to move on for trophies in his career, and then you hear Spurs fans replicate it, it's like, fuck me, they're coming from a position where they hate Tottenham and they want him gone. Can you not see that? Stop bringing me this stupid argument of, oh, you need to let them move on for the better of their career. I don't care what's best for them when they're outside of Tottenham. I care what's best for Tottenham Hotspur. So just stop with this nonsense and falling into these traps. Maybe we need to let them go to win trophies. It's bollocks.
It's just them trying to tempt us. Yeah, they're trying to lure him over, and they're tired of because they're forced to wax lyrical about TikTokers like Anthony. They want Harry Kane. They want to wax lyrical about Harry Kane. They want him on their team. You're absolutely right. They're trying to lure him over.
But what it's doing as well, though, Jacko, it's opening conversations where I feel some of them are borderline disrespectful. Where people are starting to sort of, diminish what he brings to Tottenham, this, that, and the other. And it's actually starting to center borderline disrespectful discussions on one of the best players in the world. And I don't like it.
I think they insult his intelligence, to be honest, Dave and Sean. When I see it sometimes on TalkSport, the way they sometimes phrase it, like, what was it, Mike Richards, who says, I can't even understand how Harry Kane sleeps at night. And you're just like, this is, getting to a certain extreme, and that's where I feel like that's when you're, really, it's not even just debate or just sort of classic gossip and back and forth just for selling a bit of newspaper. That's just sort of like insulting his intelligence. Should we try to maybe look at some players that maybe have some confusing futures? Maybe start with your favorite, Johnny, Big Richie. Can he make up for a terrible season under a new manager and a different formation?
Yeah, look, I actually think that he would do really well. I say really well. I think that he would do. He suits that number 9 role, the work that's required of him, right? And I actually would, like, knowing what I know now, having listened to these Celtic fans and the guys that do these tactical breakdowns and what's asked of the number 9, I would give him a lot more rope. I would be less expectant, less demanding of him if I saw him doing the things that are a little bit less visual, a little bit less visible, a little bit less rewarded, so to speak, with the time on the ball. You know, I think he fits that number 9 role with the energy that he has, the willingness to press and all that sort of that side of the game. I've never criticized him for his work rate. I just don't think he's particularly a technically good football player. And I think that he would work well, especially off the ball, in pressing the back line of the teams we come up against. And that is going to be an incredibly important part of us. If we want to go from a 30-40% possession side to a 60-70% possession side, then it's going to be the efforts of the front line hammering down on their defensive line, which forces the opposition to go long. And then you need a really smart centre-back who's brilliant in the air, like an Aymeric Laporte, like a Edmund Tapsoba, whoever, to come in and then to get that ball, win it back, and then recycle the possession and go again. Someone like Richarlison in that 9 role, I think, would have a significantly better chance of having a successful season in a Postecoglou setup than in a Conte setup, 100%.
Is he capable of scoring actually 15 goals, though, like in a season? As much as I love Richie, as much as I love doing pigeon dancing, Dave, and as much as I love his background story and all that sort of thing, can he actually score 15 goals in a season? Because I think if you're brought in for 60 million, that's probably what you should be capable of. It's not like he was brought in for 10 or 15 million. I know it's not his fault what the price was or anything like that, but he's going to forever have that big price tag behind him. And also the weight of, you know, being the backup striker to Harry Kane. Can he score 10 to 15 goals next season?
Look, I think if you were talking across all competitions with a Europa League or Europa Conference League, I would say 100% yes. But, you know, you got to look at, you know, the top scorers list in years gone by. Like, for instance, Ivan Toney, 20 at Brentford, but he's their main man. You know, if Richarlison is not the main man at Tottenham, you're probably looking at maybe him contributing about 10 Premier League goals across the season. Any more of that for me is a bonus. It'd be nice for him to get a lot more, believe me. But, you know, if Harry Kane stays and he's competing with Harry Kane for that spot, you know, you're not going to get 15, 20 goals out of this guy, you know, especially without Europe. But I agree with Sean. I actually think he's a player that, you know, it's like with Ange Postecoglou, right? We know that he likes to use them 5 subs to keep the high-octane energy, to keep the press and stuff like that. I think that's where Richarlison will benefit the most. And for me, it's how he uses them minutes when he comes on, that maybe 30-odd minutes that he's going to get under Ange in most games. It's how he uses them, for me, that dictates how he's going to go under Ange Postecoglou. Now, Ange Postecoglou, he loves Maeda at Celtic. He is a striker, but he plays him out wide purely because of his work rate and stuff like that. What lets Maeda down is his finishing. And Richarlison sort of has had the same problem this year where he has had chances and his finishing has let him down. But the reason why I think he actually has a good chance of working under Ange Postecoglou is like what Sean said. The work rate is already there. He's willing to chase down anything anyway. And for me, this is what I wanted to assign Richarlison for, was not for the build-up player or anything like that. It's just get him what he's good at. Get ball in behind, let him run onto it. Get crosses in the box, let him go and attack it. I think it will be getting back to what Richarlison is good at. It'll definitely suit him, and I'd expect to see, you know, a much better player next year. Because we ain't selling him. We ain't selling him this year. No one's going to come in and pay anywhere near the money that we paid for him. And, you know, so for me, he's one that will be sticking around.
I could actually see Ange maybe being won over a little bit by Richie just because of that work rate, because of the fact that he does a lot of kind of unselfish things off the ball. The way he also just is an absolute nuisance to defenders, right? He'll dive onto the floor and then he'll get up into the defender's face and, you know, stick his head in, you know, his chest, you know, and everything like that. And I feel like Postecoglou almost will be kind of immediately won over by those sort of things. Like, he is a bit of a charisma, kind of fiery guy himself. So maybe these guys could actually get along, you maybe think. So I'm interested to see if Richie has that future under Ange. And maybe somebody else who has an interesting future is Pedro Porro. Will Ange be a willing prisoner, Shawnee, of Pedro Porro? Will he find a place for Pedro Porro? I feel like he's shown that it's really more his future is as a winger. And can he be a winger in an Ange system, Shawnee? Can he get, you know, the goals and the assists, you know, that are actually needed to be a winger in the Premier League?
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the takeaways from doing that research, that tactical breakdown, is A lot of the responsibilities of the wingers is to whip the ball in. I don't think there's a better crosser of the ball on the right side of Tottenham than Pedro Porro. Arguably in the club, actually, I think that what we've seen from him is he's got the ability to put it on a sixpence. I think he's got 3 or 4 assists in a relatively short period of time. He's also scored some goals playing from the right wing back spot, or even the occasional goal playing in the right wing or the right midfielder, however you want to think about his current usage. But look, I think he's going to thrive next season. I think he's going to thrive anyway. I think Pedro Porro is a player that it just took a little bit of time for him to settle in. He was nervous. He's still a human being. The Leicester game being his debut was an absolute shambolic team performance. He didn't do himself any favours, was caught a little bit out by the pace maybe and just the expectations of him, whatever, the pressure. But since then, he's shown that he is an absolute workhorse. He's passionate. He loves it. He's like you say, it's his prison, and we're just all participants in the system. I think he will be taken under the wing by Postecoglou. I think Postecoglou will love his personality, his effort, his work rate, and his technical ability. I don't think he'll work at right back. I think that there might be scenarios. We did speak about this yesterday, Jack, where when you look at the way that Celtic set up, when they had their left back, Taylor was their main kind of the guy that was given the responsibility of going forward, and their right back sort of tucked in, kind of like under the Nagelsmann system where they go to a 3-1-5-1 and they have Kimmich in the 6 at Munich. I think that you could see the same sort of system be used at Tottenham under Postecoglou, where you have, if you're going to play Udogie on the left and give him the freedom to move forward, then I think you might see Emerson Royale more commonly used at the right back to tuck in and make a bank of 3. But there is the option, if Ben Davies hangs around and isn't part of the club system, where you could play Ben Davies at left back and ask him to come in and play in the left of a 3 and give Pedro Porro the freedom to move forward and play the role that sort of Taylor does at Celtic on the left, but sort of invert that and do it on the right. Pedro Porro has the ability to go down the byline or to cut in, which is something that Postecoglou expects from his fullbacks. So whether you're going to use him occasionally as a right back, if you put a defensive left back in, that works for me, or just out and out as a rotation player to swap and use interchangeably with Decky, that's okay with me too. I think having Decky and Pedro Porro fighting for the same spot, they will utilize each other and competition for places to level up. We've seen Decky when he was dropped, and I think it was last season, he was dropped for one game, came back in and hated that idea and had something to prove. I think you've got 2 winning personalities in Decky and Pedro Porro, and seeing them fight for the same space, I think it will be really good for business.
They're so different from each other too, and that's actually a good thing, right? Is that Pedro Porro offers that delicious cross, but more from kind of taking it to the outside and then taking it around his man to then whip it in. And then Kulusevski offers something different, where he's going to try to cut inside and then whip it in from there, from around the edge of the penalty area. And they're both spectacular sort of guys at being dangerous in the penalty area as well. Kulusevski can kind of dice and weave his way through past people, and Pedro Porro, I mean, probably has had some of the finishes of the season. I feel like, Dave, that's where I think he's proven he could be a winger actually in the Premier League. Is he has a good cross, that's checks a box to make it, and he also has obviously a finishing boot on him. He's had some nice finishes, very clean finishes as well, and some of his celebrations I've absolutely loved.
Yeah, look, with Pedro Porro, I think Ange Postecoglou might try to make it work at right back for him to fit Kulu and Porro into the same team. But one thing that Ange Postecoglou won't have is Porro not being able to cope defensively. Juranovic at Celtic wasn't able to cope defensively at times, and he ended up coming out of the team altogether, and they brought in this guy from Canada, Johnston is his name, and he's gone on to be absolutely unbelievable for them at right back. And that's why no one's talking about Juranovic anymore, because going forward he was good and offered a lot, but defensively he was being caught out an awful lot and he was suspect. So Ange had to change that. He had to evolve that, and he did. So for me, I don't think he's going to tolerate that too long from Pedro Porro. But I do see Pedro Porro being more used as a right winger. But, I wouldn't be, if there's any fans out there too concerned about, Porro and Kulusevski chased it for the same spot, I wouldn't be. Because they're going to get minutes. If one starts, then the other one will be coming on around 60, 65 minutes anyway, religiously nearly every single game. And they both offer different things. If the in-swing and crosses isn't working from Porro, you bring on Kulu and you have that something different where he wants to beat men, he wants to get on the byline, he wants to cut inside, and vice versa. If Kulu starts and that's not working, you bring Porro on and you can change the game that way. So I actually like them two options down the right-hand side where you can change the game. You're getting two quality players, technically gifted players, that will work hard and run for you all day, but offer you different things from that right-hand side. And in football, you need that. You need the different things to be able to unlock the door. If you're keep trying the same thing, it's well and good. You know you're trying. But at some stage, you have to have a bit of nous to be able to switch it up. And we have that over on the right-hand side. And I would look at Porro more as a winger under Ange Postecoglou than a right back. However, I do think for the first little while he's going to try and make Porro work at right back. But if Porro can't handle it defensively, he will be whipped out of there. He won't Ange Postecoglou, and you'll see Emerson be put out there because Ange Postecoglou will not accept, someone who keeps getting done defensively, because that's Ange Postecoglou's biggest Achilles heel, is being done defensively, that defensive unit, because we play so high. So whoever's across that back line, they have to be able to defend first and foremost.
For Sean? Sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I haven't seen his dog, no. Nice.
He has two of these.
Do we know what the names are? The prison
No, I
dogs.
haven't. I'm stalking him on Instagram. I'll find out, maybe Bugsy and Pedro Porro's dogs can have a play date sometime.
That'd be nice. Be nice. What I would say just on that, with regards the I agree with what David's saying with the, whether or not there's always the need to have only one of Decky and Porro playing on the right. I also think that you could see maybe Decky being pushed into that kind of third number 8 on the right hand side, who plays in the Matt O'Reilly role.
He's brilliant.
I think Decky does fit that kind of mode. Being able to get up there, he can still get back and do the defensive work, can still press, and also be the guy who joins in to make the 5 up front, the kind of the bank of 5. So it's going to be interesting to see how, when Postecoglou's had 7-8 weeks of kind of time on the training ground, how we're going to line up. I think that there could be space for both of them. I agree with Dave that if it doesn't work, if Porro gets exposed once or twice defensively, then the right back thing won't really be an option for him. I didn't think it would be the main option anyway. I thought that Emerson Royale would be there, and if they're going to use one of the fullbacks to be more aggressive and have more freedom, it would probably be Destiny Udogie. But like I say, I'm sure he'll be sort of tinkling and trying out different ideas before he lands on what his best system is with the squad that he has.
For sure. And Jack, you started off this whole Porro segment saying, will Ange Postecoglou want to get down with Pedro Porro's prison? Well, Jack, we've got Postecoglou, the prison warden, and we've got Pedro Porro, the prisoner. So, it's absolutely brilliant. It's a match made in heaven. I believe Daniel Levy's watching us and he wants to get all the pieces of the prison in place. It's brilliant. Just for us.
Get all the pieces of the jail bar together. Absolutely right. Lots of players, though, are coming back from loan, Shawnee, and I feel like plenty of them don't have a future. I feel like Rodon, Winks, no chance, really. I'd be quite surprised if they did. But what do you think? Likes of Jed Spence, Tanguy Ndombele, Brian Hill. What do you think? Any of those guys maybe you feel like could surprise us?
I do think Brian Hill would suit the system. But I've read today that I think he doesn't want to come back. I think he wants out. He wants to stay in Spain. So, look, if that's the case, look, he won't want to come back as a Europa League winner to sit on the bench and have barely any minutes. I personally think the system would work him. He is a hard worker. He does, he is technically clever and he can, do a lot of the things that would work in this system rather than in a Conte system. If he doesn't want to be here, then we have to go. Maybe the benefit of him winning the Europa League is that it creates a higher price tag on his head, and maybe we can get some of the money back or more than the money back than we paid for this guy. As far as Joe Rodon, I think he'll be moved on for whatever you can get back on him, a couple of million quid. I think the same Sanchez will either be torn up or let go for free. Perisic, I think he's not on loan anyway. Who else is on loan? Harry Winks will be gone. Serge Reguilon, I think that he could be an option. I'd rather Serge Reguilon personally as a player. I prefer him to Ryan Sessegnon. I think we had this conversation yesterday, Jack. I think that for me, Reguilon, I'd like to see back in the squad to compete with Udogie. The problem is that when we made that list, we ended up having all 4 of the players that we wanted to sell from the squad, to go back on loan or to sell. They were all homegrown players, and I think that it might end up affecting our homegrown quota. Yeah. So I would like Reguilon, Ndombele. Look, we got to go back and forth on this one. I know how you guys feel. I personally don't think he has the work rate or the energy or the effort. Yeah. A very good player, and if he was a hard worker,
with me.
Dave
would be mad if you grouped him with
well,
me.
I think that if he's willing to put in the effort, then I think he's a great player that would suit that could fit into either of those 2 number 8 roles. But I just don't think that he has the effort. I just don't think it's part of his makeup, and I don't think a leopard doesn't change its spots. If he hasn't figured out a way to find the desire yet, I don't think he will. And so, at best, he could be a luxury that comes off in the last 20 minutes. But as far as someone that will buy that Conte will buy into, and that he'll buy into Conte, as someone that Postecoglou will buy into, and as someone that will buy into Postecoglou's efforts and demands, I don't think Ndombele will be the guy. So, yeah.
Any quick?
I don't know if there's anybody else is there. Jed Spence. Jed Spence, interesting one. I don't really know if he's developed or improved enough in France to, from what I've seen of him, and it's very little. I've seen very little as a sample size, but I've never really been that impressed or wowed by him. So I just don't think he's there yet. I personally think he'll be loaned back out, and maybe this time he could be loaned to a Premier League club so we can keep a closer eye on him over the season. But I don't think he's ready for what we're trying to get to next season, personally.
I don't think he's defensively sound. I think he's been exposed. I think Antonio Conte saw through that, and I think even the Rennes coach saw through that. He definitely had a few occasions where he just either wasn't tracking his man, let the ball sort of, go over his head. It was just sort of simple, kind of defending, kind of moments where, yes, he has that sort of recovery pace to like get back there. But there were moments where it's just kind of too little too late, with Jed Spence, when I've seen some of the goals that maybe he's, contributed to, or at least, been partially responsible for, that Rennes have conceded. And it's kind of a telling sign that I know Traore is one of their better players, and the moment he was going to come back, from injury, Jed Spence wasn't going to get the minutes that he wanted anymore. But he all of a sudden was dropped from the squad entirely. And I think one of the times it was due to injury, but I heard it wasn't really all the time due to injury. Some of the times he was dropped from the squad even. So that's again, sort of reflective of some things. Some people were speaking about earlier about how apparently he had some issue with parents going to the training ground and things like that as well, which I don't know. That does, seem to be also a bit of a worry sign. I'm going to keep the faith though in Jed Spence, even though I did put out that video a while ago about, his struggles over in France. I feel like maybe there is potentially a position for him in this team if he wanted to play sort of in an inverted, kind of role where he can kind of actually, help fill into the midfield as kind of like a fullback and sort of be able to keep possession, make runs past players. He's good at maybe doing a 1-2, to maybe just sort of keep possession as well. And he's a good ball carrier at the end of the day. That's probably his biggest asset, is that he's good at taking it past his man. I'm not sure if he's that capable of whipping in a great cross, but he is good at, taking it past his man. That's for sure. Brian Hill, I would say. Yeah, Dave, take it away.
Just while we're on the Jed Spence, so I don't come back to it. I remember speaking to you before, Jack, about Jed Spence, and when you look at the course of his career, right, the only club that's really worked for him was Nottingham Forest. But that's because he had a manager who believed in him and showed him the love. And I remember saying to you before and having this conversation, I actually think he is a player that he needs to feel that love, and you will get the best out of him. You look at Middlesbrough, it didn't work out there. He wasn't shown any love, anything like that. Shipped out to Nottingham Forest, people said, oh, this guy's useless and everything else. Steve Cooper gives him a bit of love and gets the very best out of him. And when I look at Ange Postecoglou, he's that sort of guy. He makes you feel invincible. He will give you that love as well. So for me, if Jed Spence knuckles down and works hard, Ange Postecoglou will give him that love. And you might see a complete different Jed Spence, because the anomaly in his career has been Nottingham Forest, where Steve Cooper really showed him that love. Because Jed Spence, I think he's one that naturally he will work hard. But if that's not reciprocated or acknowledged by the manager, you get a player who just, his head's not in it. He loses it, this, that, and the other. Whereas I think Ange might show him that love, and I think you might see a complete different player. I wouldn't write Jed Spence off just yet.
These guys, I think, are all fighting for, their futures, and they're fighting for their careers, I think, at Tottenham. I think that's the case with Brian Hill. If he actually does want to stay here, here's his opportunity with a brand new system, a new style of play to maybe get into the team. But obviously he has, maybe some options in the likes of Spain and whatnot, maybe to go back to. Jed Spence, it's not really gone too well for him. But again, new manager, new system. Maybe he can, find a spot in this sort of squad. And I would say the same thing for Tanguy and Ndombele, despite, maybe everybody just wanting just to be done with him entirely. But if Spurs were to have to stick with him in some way, I could see him as either a creative midfielder to back up a James Maddison, actually, just in case, James Maddison needed to be, given a rest, or, his injury, troubles and things like that. Tanguy and Ndombele, when kind of played a bit higher up the pitch, and maybe when not given any sort of defensive kind of like responsibility behind him, I actually think he's quite good at being able to sort of cause trouble. I think he's, has a good pass on him. He's able to thread the lines. And then he's also, as we know, pretty much unpressable, and he can spin anybody. He can skill past anybody. The talent, the skill is all there. It's just obviously everything between the ears, with that guy. But I don't know. I just feel like with Tanguy, like, he could be a valuable backup creative midfielder for what is a team that's not playing any European football. Like, obviously we have to look at our standards, and we have to look at what we're capable of having. And he's actually a guy that, if you get the juices out of him, and if you get the right, sort of tune out of him, he would not be a bad player to be bringing off the bench, if he has some confidence, and if he has actually, less of that sort of moping around, type of attitude. And also knowing Ange Postecoglou, he's not going to have him around if he knows that's going to be the case, if he's just kind of, moping around and things like that. Yeah.
Do you think the fans would give him another bite after what happened at Morecambe?
I don't think so. But I mean, the fans right now, Sean, I feel like are so easy to write off players quickly as well. Like, it just doesn't feel like we're in the best moment. Like, we've seen Emerson, go through hell. We've seen a lot of players go through hell, recently, that have even just been recently brought in players, even Pedro Porro, right, who's had pretty decent, like, sort of, like, time at Spurs. Like, yes, he's contributed to some goals that have been conceded, but he's also made up for it by contributing some goals, like, as well. But it feels like he's been kind of slated after certain games and whatnot. So I feel like you're probably right. Realistically, no, I don't think the fans could take him back, and I don't expect them to. And maybe the board and, everybody have to come to terms with that. Yeah.
That's the difference for me, Jacko. Like, you've got other players like Emerson where the fans turned on them, but he never dished out anything back in retaliation. In fact, he said, okay, I'll take that. I'm going to raise you. I'm going to spend $1 million on my own game. No. You look at someone like Endon Fatass, Endon Donuts, he refused to do that. He showed disdain towards this club. A team against Morecambe where he should walk out there and he should be dazzling that pitch with his eyes closed, because he has that ability. You hear what Gareth Bale said about the guy. He's trained with some of the greatest players ever at Real Madrid. And, he was asked about, but in training, he mentioned Ndombele. The talent is there. But he showed disdain by trudging off, when we're losing 1-0 to fucking Morecambe. And then when the fans booed him, he started walking even slower. That's why he was shipped out here, because fans will not take it. They will not accept that. If he comes back here and he starts doing that, it's not going to be long before a fan ends up going on the pitch and tries to attack him. And you have to, fans, like, we're at a point now where we see so many players refusing to run for the badge. They ain't going to tolerate it. But the biggest thing is, Ange Postecoglou ain't going to tolerate it. He'll smell a rat within a few minutes, and Ndombele will be out the door. He will not bend his rules to keep Ndombele here. No chance of it. And now, unless Ndombele, like Sean says, comes back with a new work ethic, and all of a sudden he starts sprinting around, he's lost about 20 stone, okay, you might look at it. But until then, not a hope. But even then, I still think the club will look to get rid of him at all costs, because you cannot do what you've done against Morecambe. I'm sorry. It's unacceptable, because once you allow him back in, it opens the door for every other fucker to start doing the same.
Postecoglou wasn't like the first name on the team sheet, Sean, but maybe he can sort of come in here and at least do certain things that straight away we would say that Conte sort of never did, and things that maybe Conte, we were always frustrated with Antonio Conte. One of them being like early substitutions, the other one being changing the personnel, like when the form starts to turn, And maybe another thing is just incorporating those younger talents like Brian Hill, Papa Matsasar, but also kids from the academy. Do you feel like there's things that you can sort of say that Postecoglou just straight away is going to do that we maybe never saw Conte do?
Yeah, 100%. I'm excited to see where he finds some talent from in random corners of the world. I feel like, I know that Tottenham haven't got a historical track record of identifying gems, right? And Tottenham fans might, in the past, historically, have turned their nose up to these unknown names. But I feel like with the pivot towards the tactic, like the kind of database tactical stuff, with Postecoglou's track record of identifying players that have done brilliant things from Japan, etc. I think if Postecoglou goes and finds some young gem that we don't know about, I think we'll pay attention to it. We'll be excited about it, and we'll bring this guy in and have high hopes. Versus with Conte, that was never going to happen, right? Conte's not the sort of guy that goes and understands that, like, he doesn't know what's going on in Finland's third league, or what the youth setup in Indonesia is like right now, But I think that Postecoglou might have a little bit of insight there. I think that you are going to see, hopefully, obviously good football, attractive football, which Conte stuck to his guns. The one area where I think I'm a little bit worried is I criticize Conte for never having a plan B, for always being stubborn and doing the same thing over and over again. And I feel like this guy's probably going to do something similar, right? He's not going to try. He's not going to change his tactics. He's going to also, just hammer home his system. So whether or not that's going to frustrate me, yeah, I'd imagine that I would be more patient with predictable football, as long as the football is exciting to watch. Part of the problem with me was that it was boring to watch, and it was predictable, and it was never changing. With regards, I don't know whether he's going to have the kind of courage of his convictions to make big decisions. Like, if Harry Kane is having a bad day, will we ever see Harry Kane substituted under a Postecoglou system? If Sonny's having a bad period of form, are we going to see him replaced? Not entirely sure. I don't know enough about his willingness to make those sort of decisions. I think that you're going to see a couple of players really shine under a Postecoglou man management style. I think that you might see, I don't know whether it might be a Pape Matar or a Bissouma. It could be anyone. It could be any number of players in the squad who just absolutely thrive under this particular guy's relationship that they forged together. And I think that, like I say, I look at Bissouma and I think that I look at him like a new signing this summer. I don't think he barely, he's barely like invisible almost for the majority of last season. So I'm excited to see what he can do. But I do think there's going to be an absolute gem of a kid, someone in the youth. It might be Ollie Skip, who knows? Could be someone who just absolutely thrives, and that's going to be brilliant to see. And that's not something that I think you would have seen under a Conte style, because he just doesn't have that kind of personality where he's going to take the time to develop and build relationships with the youth. He's someone that's a bit more standoffish and let Stellini do all that kind of thing. So yeah, there's loads of things that I'm excited to see. The one hesitation is, if he's just a plan A merchant, then what happens if that gets found out quickly? Where do we go then? I don't know, and time will tell.
Sean, on that, just quickly, I was listening to a player from Brisbane Roar, right, from Australia. And he was there saying last night, they asked him about the plan B. I think it was that idiot Conde. He was asking about the plan B. And your man said, there is no plan B. He just does plan A quicker and faster. It's like, okay, people have sussed us out. Because he was saying that players at that time are coming to him and saying, look, we think teams have sussed us out. He's like, it's okay. We'll just get quicker. We'll just get faster. If you can't do it, I'll just get someone else in that can. And that way, no one is ever sort of allowed to slack off. But when you look at like a Postecoglou and Antonio Conte, right? Antonio Conte wanted older players because they were more positionally aware. And it was a very structured system. So you automatically, you're getting, Conte wants a ready-made player now. Whereas when you look at Postecoglou, it's completely different. It's not about ready-made players. It's about down-to-earth, hungry players that want to work hard. And if you're not going to do it, he will make you stand there and watch the training session while he brings a young lad over and puts him in and watches him do it. He'll do that, not a problem. I think, look, with Ange Postecoglou, I think for the first 10 games of the season, It's going to be a bit of a trial period, I think, because he is going to rely on some people. And it's sort of what Pochettino done when he come here with Adebayor and stuff. But when it wasn't working and he's refused to do what we wanted him to do, Walker, Rose, Harry Kane back into the team, Bentaleb, Mason, people like that all flooded into the football team. Mason, Sigurdsson, Holtby, or Adebayor, Sigurdsson, Holtby, all them guys gone, banished, and then Levy backed them that summer to ship them out. You could very well see something like that happen at Tottenham, where he originally starts with one idea and one crop of players, but that might change. A couple of players might end up coming out and being banished, and you might see a few youngsters coming in that will want to do that hard work. And I know people say that's harsh, but that has to be done. If you want players to follow your lead and you want players to work hard, you cannot have any chinks in your armor. You can't tolerate it from anybody. So I wouldn't be surprised to see after 10 games what he starts with, to see it changed a little with different players sort of being brought in here purely because, the other players may not want to work in his system. But look, it's very exciting times ahead. It's a complete 180 from what we were used to seeing under Antonio Conte. And, I firmly believe that, Jack, me and you have alluded to this quite some time, that a lot of Paratici's recruitment was 25 or under. And he lowered the average age of the squad. And I do feel now it is ready for someone like an Ange. You see a Porro, Richarlison, people like that, they all work hard. Okay, maybe with Richarlison, some people question the talent, but the work ethic is there. And, someone like Ange Postecoglou is the right man to come in and pick this up with some of these youngsters and bring this forward. Because we've signed a lot of youngsters or players like Gale and Spence and people like that who just have not been given any chance by any manager purely because someone like Gale, a Conte or Mourinho wouldn't know what to do with him. They don't want to work with him or develop him either. Whereas someone like Ange Postecoglou will. And I think now is the right time for this guy to come in, hopefully start using some of these players and seeing a more energetic Tottenham. Because there is nothing worse than last year watching, okay, we're losing games. Go and get me that ball and go make something happen. Everyone stands there. You're on the ball. You're like, okay, we're losing 1-0. Let's start moving around, get on the ball, go make something happen for me. Everyone's standing there. And I was speaking to Yola about this last night. He made a great point. He's like, under Antonio Conte, it looked like everyone wanted to just get rid of the ball very, very quickly. As soon as the ball was at their feet, they just wanted to ship it on so that the problem wasn't theirs. Whereas under Ange Postecoglou, I don't think you're going to see that. You're going to see players that will enjoy the ball, that will want the ball. And you have to get the players to change their mindset from shifting the ball quickly so that they're not the ones that make the mistake and feel the wrath of Conte to people that feel comfortable on that ball. And that's a massive thing Ange Postecoglou has to get through to these players. You have to enjoy having that ball again.
I really love both of the points that you guys made there. And also, I kind of like some of the balance points that I feel like I've heard, which is like, yes, he's going to do a lot of these things that Conte never did, but there are also some things that he's going to do that kind of Conte also, did. Like he's going to be some of the same. Like the plan A is, there's going to be a lack of that sort of, looking into the other team, maybe changing, a big thing just to throw, the other team off, right? There are those managers like Unai Emery who will just throw the whole team off by just pulling something out of the bag that no one really expects. And Postecoglou is not going to be that guy. Conte was never that guy. And then also I think brought up too is like, is he also going to be kind of like previous managers who never brought off, Sonny, never took off Kane, those sort of things too, right? Like there might be some things that he ends up being kind of just as guilty for. And let's see if we can be kind of similarly tolerant, as hopefully we need to be, I think, under Postecoglou, because let's also remind ourselves it's a trial run season for him, right? It's a season for him to get used to the Premier League, and he's going to make mistakes, and he's going to probably, look at things either a bit naively, maybe a bit ignorantly at times, and he'll probably learn from it. He seems like a guy who's quite humble though as well. He seems like a guy who comes off strong, comes off, assured of himself, but he also seems to be quite humble by the looks of things too, that can, listen and, look at himself if he got something wrong in some cases. So
just on the Kane and Son being hauled off quickly, I actually understand the point. But I think, for me, when you're chasing games, you're not going to see a Kane or a Son come off because you're chasing the game. And, proving at Tottenham over the last 6-7 years, if anyone's going to unlock the door, right, it's going to be one of them two. However, when you're winning games, and this is a bugbear of mine, and you've seen it sometimes when Sonny came off, and I feel bad at times for some because there are times where you look at Kane, you're like, he's got nothing left in his legs, take him off, you know? But, you know, you see like there was a couple of times last year where Danjuma or Richarlison came on, and all of a sudden, rather than the ball just coming back at us and at our goal, we were forcing the ball backwards towards them just by chasing it alone. And it relieved a lot of pressure on us. So there is a good argument actually to, you know, come 70, 80 minutes, if you are in a position where you're leading and clearly players are getting tired and they're just sitting back in the shape, because you got to understand that's naturally going to happen for a period of time under Ange Postecoglou, because they've been so used to it for 4.5 years now of being told to sort of sit back, you know, soak up the pressure, this, that, and the other. So that's naturally going to start happening in games next season. It's up to Ange to sort of, you know, haul players off, get new players on to keep his system going. And, you know, when it comes to the end of these games, especially if you're winning, you know, there is an argument just to get legs on, to start doing running and needless chasing down that maybe Kane and Son don't have the legs in their energy, the energy in their legs to do at that time of the game.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening back to this podcast. Please, everybody as well, do subscribe to Shawnee's. I mean, of course, you know, you see him plenty on this channel, but I imagine if anybody did click on this video that maybe is new to the Spurs YouTube community, just new to just maybe the Spurs, you know, kind of media and just YouTube in general, feel free to head on over there, smash that subscribe button. He's got plenty of good content over there. He's walking, you know, with the likes of his dog, just chatting Spurs, just good old fashioned content, everybody, that everybody does enjoy. He's does a lot of service for us over here as well. So please show him some support. Hit that like button on the way out as well. There was a bonus section for members too, if you did want to check that out. We spoke about the captaincy and kind of spoke about the future of it. And if that does sound interesting to you, feel free to grab a Flat Cap membership. It's a great way to support the channel, and you get little perks here and there as well. And Dave and I are going to make a huge revamp of it as well to make it even better for all of you guys. So everybody, like I said, leave some comments down below as well as to what maybe any thoughts, maybe things that we might have left out, some points that maybe you thought were interesting, or maybe we got entirely wrong or delusional as per usual. But yeah, everybody, hit that like button on the way out, and we will be seeing you. Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs. In Big Ange we trust.